Okay, we're live. Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to have this conversation. It has been over 4 decades since women in the US started outpacing men in college. And yet, here we are, 2025, the gender pay gap widened in the United States for the second year in a row, leaving women paid on average 81 cents on the dollar relative to their male peers. For Black women, it was around 68%, and Hispanic women around 64%, as much as white men on average. And importantly, it is not just women who bear the cost of their own underpayment. 45% of American mothers, for example, are the primary financial breadwinners in their households. And we know that women are still tasked with the majority of caregiving responsibilities for children, as well as the elderly, the ill, the disabled, other dependents, meaning the economic insecurity of American women is the economic insecurity of Americans, American families, everybody. So today, I am so excited to be talking to Claire Bresnahan English, Senior Director of the Workplace Innovation Now, or WIN Challenge, a $60 million nationwide grant competition to support women at work. Thank you for being here, Claire.
Thank you for having me. This is a time of urgency and a time of opportunity, and so just really excited to talk with you and your audiences because I think they're going to hopefully walk away with some ideas of solutions.
Yes.
Facing.
Yes. I love to frame it around solutions for a change instead of problem. Now, we often hear stats like how addressing structural and legal barriers to women's participation could boost global GDP by as much as 20%. And you've been working in this space and in this mission for a long time. But can you kind of start by breaking down what stats like that really mean in material terms?
Yeah, I would say for us at the Aspen Institute and why we are so excited about the WIN Challenge is founded in that research, but also the lived experiences of us as women and families that when you invest in women, you're investing in families, you're investing in communities, you're investing in the overall economy, right? You laid that out so beautifully. So the aspect of where the stats that make it real are the fact that you have the growing percentage of women as breadwinners, whether it's the single moms or just how the very fact of our economy requires two incomes to even not even thrive, just survive. Uh, all this comes down to the fact of when you are creating our whole theory of change is that when you create workplaces with the needs of women in mind, you're creating better workplaces for everyone so that everyone can thrive. And as AI is rapidly changing, not only our lifestyles, but the way our workplaces are structured, what is going to be expected of us through performance reviews and salary and pay discussions, all this is transforming an environment where we have to really think about how women are shaping and building the future of work. And this is from our perspective, a once in a generation moment where the changes, the discussions on everything from AI fluency and AI governance at work, how it's developed into our work systems, but into our products, how we're looking at the trends you just talked about in terms of women leaving the workplace. All of this is becoming this perfect storm of a moment of where we can either exacerbate the barriers of the past or we can take this moment to make sure that we are building new systems that are supporting women and then therefore creating better workplaces, right? It's a lot of folks talk about the curb cut effect, about actually understanding that when you build workplaces with caregivers in mind, predominantly who are women, but we also know that more and more millennial dads are
Mhm.
wanting to stay and be involved more in time with their family, with their kids. But we also understand the sandwich generation is coming into more leadership positions where they are not only having the responsibility of childcare, but also looking at elderly care. There's all these elements here where you create workplaces with women in mind. You're creating better workplaces for everyone and has vast economic and financial ramifications, not only for individual families, but for major sectors in our economy.
Well, you've been working in this space in some capacity for a long time. And speaking of solutions, we're pretty familiar at this point with barriers, but I'm wondering if there are really themes in terms of solutions you've seen be effective.
The great part of this work, Stephanie, is you're right. A lot of my career has been looking at, okay, what are the challenges? But on the other side of the challenge has to be the solution part of the equation, right? How we can actually get some progress here. And at the WIN Challenge, we're partnering with Pivotal. Melinda French Gates is organization on a $60 million grant competition that's looking for bold solutions to three different areas in the workplace culture and practices, leveraging AI, also mitigating the risk with AI, and third, around narrative change. So our grant competition is underway. We had over 800 applications from nonprofits all across the country, across every region. And what we found is that the applications are focused on barriers of the past and the most recent. So the most common barriers that folks are looking at are the broken run. So getting to the promotion rates that impact salary and career trajectory way past even just that first promotion rate. And then looking at caregiving responsibilities and how our systems are just not supported for them. And then the newest barriers of how do we get access to AI tools. And it's not just the access, it's the wraparound support. And we can dig a little bit into, there's a lot of conversations around AI hesitancy and AI adoption with women. And I think it's really warranted about to talk about the pros and cons. But what I'll say is the solutions then are really looking at when it comes to AI, what does it look like when tools are built for us, shaped by us, when you really have women at the center of building and shaping how AI is even built into our workplaces or actually building the tools, for example, for caregivers, tools that are looking at wage theft, tools that are
Mm,
looking at supporting for frontline workers around sexual harassment and bias in toxic workplaces. And what's amazing is that it's because it's from nonprofits either really localized, focused on their region or their sector, or organizations that have been advocating for women's rights for a long time who are now looking at how AI can actually be built to support their communities. This is just an incredible example of where you have folks not just being passive and saying, okay, the AI revolution is going to happen just to us. It's no, we are going to shape it. We're going to use it to be able to benefit our communities and what our needs are. I think that's just really exciting. And then you have really exciting solutions around caregiving, whether it's looking at how do we do more advocacy within employers and what employers are offering their employees and or other solutions around actually how do we empower employees themselves. And I think that's really smart that I think so often in our social change work or when we're looking at solutions, we want the one single answer. But I feel
yeah.
like so much of us know it is an ecosystem, it is multiple different approaches working together. So it's exciting to see this combination of employer based interventions and employee interventions so that it's not one or the other.
I agree. When I was researching the book, I was trying to give myself and readers a framework for thinking about these things. And one of the things I identified was you operate at the interpersonal level, then you operate at the institutional level, and then you operate at the political and cultural level. And as you were just talking about things like AI tools to kind of track something like wage theft, I had this aha moment because we're seeing so much backsliding in the organizational level, the institutional level, and workplaces with people scaling back their commitments to things like pay transparency and reporting, their representation and diversity. But if you have now better tools for practicing those systems of transparency at the interpersonal level, and then you can operate at the cultural level in making sure that narrative is getting out there in spite of institutions scaling back their commitment, you can still keep those organizations accountable even if they're not keeping themselves accountable. So that's a just like a thought moment I had as you were speaking. I'm wondering like how else you're seeing this kind of scale back that we're seeing from commitments to women's progress and advancement happening at the political level and institutional level kind of being reflected in the applications you got for the Win Challenge. Are people responding to this moment? I know you said, we're obviously responding to these chronic issues of things like the broken rung and caregiving, but what specifically about this moment is coming up that you're seeing?
I'd say what I think we should give credit to the applicants and to so many of the innovative change makers who are constantly right. They're constantly on defense. They're trying to think about offense. They're trying to be visionary for what could the next decades upon decades look like for their communities and at the intersection of the workplace. And so I just want to say, like, I really, for all of our applicants who have participated, just so grateful for the work that they're leading right now because they are choosing to be innovative at a time where we really need their leadership. So I just say that, like, just coming from a nonprofit and civil society background just makes me really proud to be part of this sector. Um, What I'd say overall is that change makers and the innovators who applied are being really smart about going back to the research and whether again this is either research that's coming out of universities or their own surveys and or also just highlighting the lived experience, so it's both are showing up in our applications, is going back to the data that we have that shows that when you are creating solutions that are centered around women, it's not zero sum, that you are really truly building a workplace where everyone's going to be able to thrive. Everyone's going to be able to be more productive. They're going to be able to be more effective in their roles. They're going to be able to be more creative. I mean, this is a time where whether you're working for a small nonprofit or a large Fortune 500 company, we need the best innovations right now to be able to manage such an ever shifting, uncertain economic landscape. You need the best out of folks and to understand that when you're creating workplaces with women in mind, you're actually creating an environment where everyone can thrive. I would say it's been in a time where it can sometimes feel Pollyannish to be hopeful. It's exciting to see our change makers looking at, okay, really what is the case here to be said that there's the curb cut effect, right? In terms of leading to incredible disability activists who have shown that truly, literally, when you've developed curb cuts in our sidewalks, you have not only folks with disabilities who benefit, but you have the mom with a stroller. You have the person who maybe just went through surgery, right? So all of us are maybe aware of this, of that dynamic or not. Either way to say is like the bottom line here is that they're really making the case about the fact that this is not zero sum. We don't need to keep being trapped into a narrative that when you advance women, men don't succeed as well. And I
Mhm.
think that is really exciting. And also, I'm really proud that we're also funding so much work around narrative change as part of this solution as
Mm.
well, because it's essential as part of an overall social change theory.
Given that the data show us just how much uplifting women benefits everyone, benefits families, benefits the economy, benefits workplaces, why do you think this has been such a stalled out project for so long?
For advancing women at work,
Mhm.
what we've dedicated our lives to,
Yeah, yeah.
I would say that I I it is warranted that there is more we have enough evidence to show what's happening in terms of the rollbacks you referenced, to see how the gender pay gap has been growing, how women are leaving the workforce, particularly Black women forced out. It is important to be have that lens. What I would say though is that progress is never guaranteed.
Mhm,
That there is a sense of where, if you look at any type of social change moments, being prepared for pendulum swings is an important part of long-term strategy building. The issue is that, particularly focusing on nonprofit change makers, haven't been invested in properly to prepare for rapid action moments
mm,
and long-term planning and visioning. And so what I want to just introduce to the conversation is the importance of philanthropy and just why it's so incredible to partner with groups like Pivotal, Melinda French Gates, is that seeing that need to make major catalytic investments so that folks can be able to be prepared for rapid action, rapid response moments, and to be able to continue the long-term work of visioning and planning and living into what's possible and what happens when we can have a balance of approach and organizations are funded to do both.
mm. Yeah, I think a lot about this moment and in the course of the last several years, just how much people understandably feel despondent, disillusioned, exhausted, and I completely empathize with that. I totally get it, but I do think there is something to be said of that kind of rollback that we've seen in the backlash that we've seen didn't happen by accident. It happened through really organized movements and funding, and it's not a change I wanted to see and I don't think serves us, but I think it does show how quickly systems can and do change when there is the political will, when there is the funding, when there is the infrastructure. And so, it's a playbook to say that we can change things too quickly and effectively and systematically. Just because something is systemic doesn't mean it can't change. Systems do change all of the time, in the last few years have been evidence of that, I believe, for the worse. But, I do think there is this kind of like perversely hopeful message to be drawn from that, and saying like, okay, now that we do have people coming in and putting their dollars and their care behind the people who are on the ground doing this work and
Yeah.
basing what they do on data, there is a lot to be really excited and hopeful about. And I keep using the case study of myself living in New York City and having a 3-year-old who's going to go to free pre-K in the fall. It's like we know what works. We have solutions. We just haven't necessarily had that kind of organizing, that infrastructure, that will, the money behind it. And so that's why I'm really excited to see what you're working on with Wind Challenge. And I'm wondering, like, within the grants and applications that you're seeing, what is most exciting you?
I would say, first and foremost, there's this within the narrative change work, there is an ethos of persistence, right? There's a lot to your point around the conversation of it's easy to slide into despondency, and rightfully so. And to see that folks have this sense of innovation and this in spite of that, in the face of it. And so I'm really excited about the narrative change work that's focused on including men and the
Hmm.
solutions. I'm really excited about how multidisciplinary, this is where I'm going to nerd out a little bit about like
Yes.
the angle of looking at how we're engaging employers and employees. And so there's a mix of activism approach and there's a mix of inside entrepreneurship within an organization for systems change. I think that is so crucial. I know that's a little bit nerdy, but I think it's really important to have that multi-pronged approach. I am I'm really excited to see how many organizations are looking at how they're building tools that are specifically designed with their community in mind. So whether it's caregivers, whether it's frontline workers within the fast food industry, whether it's women in construction and manufacturing, and they're looking at what are the specific needs, what are the specific barriers, and then how can we create the tools and the systems. So it's not just the tools, right? The AI tools are important, but what are the systems that are supporting women through adoption that will help break down sometimes either the interpersonal mental barrier or also very much the systemic barrier within their workplace that would be preventing them from being able to reach AI fluency. So it's just they're really smart solutions. I would say I'm also really excited about the breadth between I'm a Midwestern gal at heart, but the Aspen Institute's here in Washington, D.C., but to see how many solutions we had from across different regions and solutions that are from maybe big metropolitan areas, but to rural local change agents as well. So I'm just really excited about the innovation that's happening um, across middle America, my homeland and my heartland. And also the fact that we have cross sector, right? There's a lot of solutions that are focused on corporate sector, looking at promotions from your first promotion to the C suite to the board, but also looking at, again, how do we support women in manufacturing? How do we
Mhm.
support women on the front line and in healthcare? It's really exciting. We put out an open call for big, bold solutions, and we got that from across America. So there's also, I'm really excited about when we have announce our awardees this fall in October, we'll also be coming, will be storytelling around the wider pool of our applicants as well, because there is so much innovation that's happening that we're having a really like close in view to.
And these solutions are all like in different phases too. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Some of these are already on the ground operating. I'm curious more about the
Yeah,
stage of each of these
yeah, great question.
initiatives.
So, we've had legacy organizations that perhaps have been doing their work around women's advocacy, or again, their work on a specific sector, or maybe they've been focused on legal advocacy for a long time. And then you have organizations who are truly brand new, who are maybe just operating under a fiscal sponsor or just started in the past year. We have consortiums of groups who are working with um, public county officials or state officials. You have private public partnerships of rounding either working with women founders of a nonprofit and for profit B Corp. Coming into so I'm really excited about what could be possible in showing new models through those partnerships. And then what's also exciting is that about over a third are really or solutions that are ready to scale, right? So part of the Win Challenge, our mission is to be able to introduce these solutions to folks across the business community, across HR solutions, and HR teams, as well as introducing them to the larger philanthropic community, and to show that these are solutions with strong proofs of concepts, that with evidence-based practices that are just ready to be scaled, that are begging to be scaled, they're ready to get to work. I think that's also really impressive that's come out of this applicant pool.
And do you see, like, a shift between these kinds of solutions and maybe some of the interventions or the way we typically talked about barriers to women's advancement that we've had in the past? Like, is there something really just that you can identify, like a theme about, what's happening in this moment with these solutions that have already been on the ground and in many cases working?
The I would say from this pool, what I could speak to is how many solutions are looking at including men. So whether
Mhm.
it's they have narrative approaches or they have convening approaches in terms of the type of cohorts they're building or the convening strategies they have for their projects into year 2 or 3, there is an aspect of how do we make sure we're not just preaching to the choir, that we
Mm,
really are looking at how we can change dual strategies of changing hearts and minds and changing actual policies and practices. That's, I think, incredibly important that we're not in this moment just talking to ourselves,
mhm,
talking to the folks who already get it, that we're reaching out, um, and that feels bold in a moment of where there is rollbacks.
mhm. Well, and also, relevant given that, most of these institutions are still run
Yeah,
by men. Most of the managers,
right.
most of the leaders, we are going to need buy-in from everyone to materially change these outcomes.
Yes, I think what's exciting within the why we pair narrative work is to understand that at the core, right, you change, in a three-layer cake, you change the workplace practices and systems, you work on shaping AI, which is drastically changing the infrastructure around work, and then narrative changes the wraparound to ensure that you truly have deep-rooted cultural change, whether it's in the workplace, but also in our larger society.
Yeah, I want to take a minute with narrative because so much of my work really focuses on myths and misconceptions that really stand in the way of this kind of change. And I'm wondering specifically in this kind of narrative sphere, first, what kinds of myths and misconceptions have you come across in your work, and how are you seeing the proposals kind of addressing that?
Yeah. I would say throughout my whole career, whether it's work when I was a advocate for Girl Scouts of the USA or was at She Should Run, working to encourage more women and girls to run for office, there's the sense, and Stephanie, you do this work a lot,
Hmm.
of always underestimating women's qualifications, always assuming that if you're supporting women, that you're gonna like end up leaving men behind. And I'm a mom of two little guys under the age of 5, knowing that we can actually live in that duality as a
Hmm.
society, we just need to be able to have more expansive approaches, again, both through narrative work and through our actual policy changes. But built on that, I think what's also really exciting is the approach of how, again, it's employer based advocacy work and solutions building and partnering and collaboration. It's employee activation, and that dual approach is incredible and I think really quite strong. And so I'd say overall, there's this sense too of um, not like a general acceptance of how this conversation around women at work and the girl bossing versus trad wifing and the
Hmm.
dichotomy of like trying to put people into binaries is just not realistic. Like most, I don't know, most American women particularly when you talk about how 45% are becoming breadwinners, don't have the time to like, am I girl bossing or am I trad wifing? Like, we are multitudes. I know so many different women with through this work we've and through our applicant pool, we've met so many different women who have many different similar or different desires, but there's this aspect of a willingness and a curiosity, like really at the sense of when challenges, a curiosity about how could we be approaching this differently? Can we please break through these uh, dual or like dichotomy that is just not really working for most people? And being able to dive into more of the conversations, I'm really excited what will come from the Win Challenges, more and more convenings led by Aspen of looking at how do we break through the norm that has been become really stale and doesn't seem to be working for most folks, no matter what, across the political spectrum, across regions, across
Yeah.
sectors, for men and for women. There's a lot at work that's not working for us. And it feels even more urgent, right? There is a lot of uncertainty because of how AI is rapidly changing our ethos and our workplaces. That this is a moment where more and more we're going to feel for everyone work's not working in different ways, right?
Mm.
And like we need to acknowledge that for different populations. And this is a moment where I actually feel like we can find some fascinating common ground.
As you were talking, I was just having this thought about how much of the narrative challenge is really driven by social media, because social media, by definition, is a curated
Mhm.
narrative, a performance. And so, like, you're talking about the kind of girl boss versus trad wife dichotomy, and it's really like, well, no one's really living either of those lifestyles, but they might be curating a version of that
Mm,
for to put out a certain narrative across social. And so I'm wondering how, a lot of this interacts with, not necessarily just the stories we tell, but kind of like the mass movement of the stories we perform, and then that how then informs the stories we wind up feeling are available to us, or expectations are available to us. And I don't know, I'm just kind of thinking out loud as I was listening to you talk, and I'm curious if you have thought a little about, how the whole internet, and I know internet is old news, but kind of the
okay.
current iterations of this
Yeah.
play into it,
Well, I would say if where this might feel a bit of a jump, but go with me here, is that I
Yeah.
think it's actually really interesting to look at is how menopause has
Mhm.
become, so let's just take that as a microcosm. In terms of, 5, 10 years ago was not on the radar in terms of whether it's like, PBS has done documentaries. You have it now across influencers. Like it is becoming a part of the national dialogue. It has absolutely had menopause related solutions introduced through the Wind
Mhm.
Challenge, all three pillars. Um, but I don't know, like focus group of two women here and anyone
Yeah.
else listening in or watching, like did your mothers, did your aunties, did your mentors talk about it? None. And so just
Mhm.
really, the incredible work of narrative change in terms of, uh, really intervening in terms of a major moment of women's health, not just moment, many years, and how that
Yeah.
intersects with the workplace, how that intersects with it also has implications on finances and economic stability for a family. There's an approach there, I think that's really fantastic in terms of looking at how narrative change really does have an impact when you can take an expansive view or a new view, right? So I just think I would say, like, what I think from the Win Challenge perspective, it's exciting. Menopause is an example where you've got interventions and solutions around menopause that are coming through that are looking at new media, traditional media, and getting how important it is to try to base those conversations in reality and facts, but realities that might not always be seen and discussed, and then also
Mm.
solutions that are actually wrapped around workplace practices and policies around menopause. So that's just, I think, like in terms of women's health and menopause, an incredible example.
That is such a great example, because I feel like every single woman I know is like, "Am I postpartum or perimenopause?" Like, perimenopause, no, not even menopause, like, perimenopause I never heard in the discourse, and now it's like every ad I'm served. So, I think to your point about, like,
Yes.
the power of these tools for good, and then, like, the cascading infrastructure that builds around that narrative change. Now, because of that narrative change, there is money, there is infrastructure, there is, like, a whole ecosystem. So, yeah, that's such a great example. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
Where can people go to learn more about the Win Challenge and the work you're doing?
Yes. Please join us. We're at winchallenge.org. Again, we're an initiative of the Aspen Institute and a program called Aspen Digital that focuses on how technology impacts our society. And if you go to windchallenge.org, you can sign up for more information. We have our announcement of our awardees coming out in October. We'll have more and more convenings coming up too, where you can help join the conversation yourself, not only in 2026, but into 2027s. And also find us on social. We'd love to be able to continue the conversation there. We want to hear your bold ideas. We want to hear the dynamics that you're facing across all the three pillars, whether it's narrative, AI, or workplace culture and practices.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Claire, for joining us. Everyone, go check out Win Challenge. I know I'm going to be following along because
Thank
I
you.
need more solutions. I need more hope. I need more narrative change. So
Yes.
thrilled. Thank you, Claire.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, we'll see everybody.
Bye. Thank you.